This time in this video we are looking at US intervention in Grenada and Nicaragua. So first of all we will look at the US invasion of Grenada. So in 1974 Grenada seized independence from the United Kingdom, and in 1979 the Marxist-Leninist New Dual movement, which was led by Maurice Bishop, gained control of the country. But in October 1983, a dispute started to develop within the New Dual movement, and a military coup was launched by the pro-leftist Cord faction. Then on the 19th of October, hardline military junta captured and executed Maurice Bishop along with 3 other cabinet members. So on the 25th of October 1983, the US invaded Grenada with a 7,000 strong invasion force. Now this was under the title of Operation Urgent Fury. Reagan justified this action as a way to protect the 600 US medical students who were based in Grenada, and for fears of a repeat of the Iran hostage crisis of 1979 to 1981. In the Iran hostage crisis, 52 American diplomats were held hostage after Iranian students took over the US embassy in Tehran. But other Caribbean states like Barbados and Jamaica also encouraged the US to take action. However, a predominant reason for invading Grenada was the fear of Grenada becoming a communist base in the Caribbean, and this was despite the fact that there was no visible attempt of a communist takeover on the country, and there was only a few Cuban military advisors. But the invasion ended on the 1st of November 1983 when the Grenadian soldiers surrendered, and Paul Scoon became the interim head of the government, and he had previously been the person who had requested US military support. So the USSR viewed the invasion as an example of US imperialism and ordered the Soviet negotiators out of the Geneva arms control talks. Margaret Thatcher also condemned the invasion because Grenada was part of the Commonwealth and had been a former colony. The UN also voted by a vote of 108 to 9 that the intervention into Grenada was a flagrant breach of international law, and a similar motion in the United Nations Security Council received widespread support, but it was vetoed by the US. On the other hand, the American citizens supported the invasion, and they believed Reagan when he had declared in a televised speech on the 27th of October 1983 that Grenada was a Soviet-Cuban colony being ready to undermine democracy. Next thing to look at is the Nicaraguan Civil War. As in June 1979, the Sandinista National Liberation Front, FSLN, seized power from General Anastasio Somoza. So this was led by Daniel Ortega Saavedra, and it resulted in the end of 46 years of dictatorship under the Somoza family. But the FSLN were committed to socialism and the overthrow of the Somoza regime, and they were successful in overthrowing the Somoza regime during the 1978 to 1979 Nicaraguan Revolution. Jimmy Carter recognized the Sandinista regime, and he provided assistance as a way of preventing them from turning towards the Soviet Union. However, when Reagan came to presidency, he regarded the Sandinistas as communists, and he likened Nicaragua to Cuba. So the Contras were founded by the old business classes and the former Somoza National Guard, and Reagan started to support the Contras in March 1981. And this included military and financial aid. But the Contras committed a large number of human rights violations, and they used terrorist tactics. So Reagan was forced to downplay this fact by engaging in a campaign of white propaganda to alter public opinion in favour of the Contras. So the Contras were only able to carry out their military activities because of the US military support. So for example, in January 1982, Reagan signed the top-secret National Security Decision Directive 17, which gave the CIA the authority to recruit and support the Contras with $19 million in military aid. But in March 1982, in response to a major Contra attack, the Sandinistas imposed press censorship on civil liberties and introduced universal military conscription, and this was the image that Reagan wanted to create of the Sandinista regime. So during the Nicaraguan Civil War, it became increasingly clear that the Reagan administration carried out illegal or questionable activities. So for example, in Nicaragua v. United States, the International Court of Justice deemed that the US had violated international law by supporting the Contras. To evade the congressional restriction on aid to the Contras as well, and that was through the Boland Amendment, the CIA attempted to persuade US allies such as Israel and Taiwan to provide funding. The US also provided covert aid to the Contras despite the congressional restriction. High-level American officials also helped to broker arms sales to Iran despite a US embargo on weapons sales to that country, and the profits from these sales were then used to fund black market arms for the Contras. The CIA also mined Nicaraguan harbors, and when ordered to pay reparations by the ICJ, the USA refused. So in the late 1980s, the Contras did see a reduction in funding from the United States, and this meant that they agreed to a ceasefire with the Sandinista regime. The Contras did remain armed though, but then the Sandinistas agreed to elections to be held on the 25th of February 1990, and they expected this to be an easy victory because they had control of the government. However, US influence meant that 14 Sandinista opposition parties were persuaded to campaign around a single leader, and this single leader was to be the pro-American and highly popular Violeta Chamorro. Now, when Chamorro came to power, she removed the Contras, and that ended the Civil War. However, despite the fact that US aid totaled over $300 million in 2 years, the country's economy was devastated by 11 years of civil war, and this would take a very long time to recover. So thank you for watching this video, and see you soon. Bye.